Can you see the screen, Ma?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So in the previous class, we were dealing with the RPA skills, right? So in that, we were dealing with how it is integrated with RPA as well as cloud, then how the web technology is connected with the RPA and how it is functioning. So for which how the HTML is taken into account, then CSS as well as how we be programming using the languages, programming languages as well as logo, and how the optical character recognition is there. Okay, so this much of things we learned. And today we are going to see start with the databases. So in the case where we'll be having the database, we'll be, as we know, every of the application, if we'll be making it into practice, that is when we need to store an information or else it need to be responsive. In addition to the JavaScript, everything and all, when we need to store some data or else to retrieve some data, we'll be going with this database concept, right? So normally we'll be using in the lab like MySQL. So with which we'll be writing the query, and we'll be, with the help of the query, we'll be updating the things as well as we'll be retrieving the values which are there for each and every subsequent things which are there. So for which, in normally when we'll be having a database like this, we can manage with the help of human help itself. But when we'll be moving with the complex database like this, it might be having as much of database which is integrated to it, because of which we need to, it is a thing we need to that is, we can't maintain it properly, as well as we need to make a relationship for which the relationship between the query, that is the database which is there, that too is a complex thing which we need to maintain. And also we can't provide such a holistic view when we'll be having as much of a relationship which is towards a particular database and other. So because of which we need RPA integration to maintain it. So in addition to, there is another disadvantage when we'll be going with the relational databases. As nowadays we know, as there are many other cloud, so many things are emerging, because of which the management, that is the relational database which is happening over there, that too is charging. That is also, they were charging huge amount of the thing. So because of which we need to take in our mind, like we need to have an alternative approach for going such things. So in addition to, as we know, in the previous thing itself, we know about the data warehouse. So in the case where we'll be having the data warehouse, we, in the user side, we'll be having some OLAP systems as analysis which is done over there, and in the other case we will be storing what all the customer relationship which is happening there, or else the enterprise resource planning which is done. All such things we will be maintaining as a database. So for which too we need to know, like that is, as we saw in this diagram, it will be done, or else it is stored in a data cube, where we need to know what is the pivot element which is there, or how the slicing as well as dicing is carried out. All such things we need to know about it. And because of without knowing, we can't take the data or retrieve any data which is there, as we are storing that much amount of data over it. So in addition to, there will be the data warehouse is used by the major companies like Facebook, Twitter, and the Hadoop and all, for handling such data. So for which we need to know about. Also, in addition to the previous, there is normal, no, there is the MySQL concept which we'll be using. They too, like Snowflake and all, there are the startup companies in which they'll be using the PostgreSQL and all. In other days, that is in other companies, they might be using the NoSQL concept, which may be including the MongoDB and all. So that are all the that is the emerging things which are happening there. And also when we'll be saying NoSQL database, it might be categorized in this way, that is the column, family, graph, document, as well as key value. So in all such aspects we can have such representation in this format, and we can also store that to the cloud too. So that is also a major thing which we need to concentrate on to. So when we'll be managing in all such ways, then that is a huge that is as we need to manage MongoDB and all, we need to know about the certain procedures, and that is how we need to adapt it. So for which we'll be going with the RPA. So for maintaining all such database, here too we'll be having the database technology which is integrated with the UiPath. So when we will be having any UiPath, we will be having such sequence. In addition to when we need to store anything towards the database, we need to connect the database, or else we need to execute the query, and that's how we need to start the transactions and all. So for example, when we'll be integrating our particular that is the processing, whatever it may be, to an API, through an API, then in the API, all such things which is relevant to the form, we'll be typing over there, and afterwards we'll be that is integrating when we need to that is transfer a money. Okay, so when we'll be making some registration for a particular seminar or whatever it might be, after which we need to include the fee details, and we need to transact the money. So in such integration, we are not able to do when we'll be not having such database. So for which in RPA and all, we'll be using the integration where we'll be connecting with the database, and with the help of the execute query option, we can do the thing properly. And next comes the application programming interface. So in the case where we'll be having the APIs, we can see to that, that is when we'll be having some APIs, it will be taking that is when we'll be sending some information towards the cloud or else the network, it will be fetching the data from the web server through the database which is connected to it, and it will be making that as a response to the client side. So in such cases, when we will be making some, for example, when we will be creating a weather app, so in such things, we need to access the data, and after setting up of the API, we need to transact money in such case. So for making that, we need to have follow some codes which are there to make that data to be requested. So for which we'll be going with this kind of any of the payment method which is there, and we need to integrate such things. So for which we need to go with this kind of RP. In addition to, as we know, even though we'll be having that much of advantages when we'll be coming across with the RPA skills, we too will be having some drawbacks too when we'll be including RPA in our technology or the applications which we'll be making through. So if we'll be having API is the one which we'll be using, then for a particular time hour, they'll be they know they are not charging, or else they'll be charging less amount of money. But when it is exceeding certain limit, or else an hour, they'll be charging some amount, some higher amount. So that might be a higher pricing is one of the drawback when we'll be going with this RPA concept. And the RPA as well as API. Then the next thing is, even though we'll be having or developing such kind of apps and all in such a way that there might be some bugs which might be arising when we'll be making some transactions and all, or else there might be some glitches which are there, even though we are developing, and also we'll be developing with curiosity. So that might be one of the drawback in which when we'll be going with the APA as well as RPA concept. And the third might be the thing where we need to there might be some other APIs which are available which might be finding attractive than when we'll be going with this kind of RPA. So that is another disadvantage when we need to when we'll be saying towards it. And mm, the development process is easier when compared with the integration part. So there is less for a need of the integration which is there when we'll be going with the kind of other normal things which we'll be using. So that might be another disadvantage when we'll be going with this kind of RPA which is integrated to API. So these are all some of the drawbacks which might be happening when we'll be integrating the RPA as well as APIs which are there. So to get rid of it, we'll be going with the artificial intelligence. So in the case where we'll be going with the artificial intelligence, it might be that is it is most powerful as well as accessible, and also whatever things which we'll be using, the technology which we'll be using, it might be enhancing the outcomes. In addition to, it will be thinking like a human and performing in an intelligent way. Um So, for example, it might be having variety of subcategories like artificial intelligence, then machine learning, as well as deep learning. So, when we'll be taking into account of machine learning, artificial intelligence, it is the one in which, based on the attended, we can see that is in RPA2, we'll be using two kind of it, right? So, the one is the that is training with the help of attended bots as well as unattended bots, and intelligent bots are there. So attended bots are one, when we'll be starting or else installing itself, it will be asking like whether your project need to be attended bot or else an unattended bot. So when we'll be giving like attended bot, it will be asking with you the number of users you will be constantly viewing or else managing the process. And the second thing is the unattended bot, which is there in which just we'll be allowing the process to do all the things, but just we'll be overseeing to it. And the third one is intelligent thing. So in which it will be trained in such a way like it will be knowing or performing all the tasks based on the practice or else the intake which is happening, and through which itself it will be identifying the task and it will be performing as like humans. So these are all the ways in which we will be adapting the machine learning concept which is here. In addition to, when we will be, for example, when we will be having some data set which is there, so after pre-processing we will be taking, so in a data set, we might be having at about thousands of entries. So based on that thousands of entries, we will be making all such things which are possible, and we will be completing or else we will be finding all the values which is relevant to what are all the data sets which are there. Then we will be producing that much of things. That is when we will be concising or else when we will be making an approximation based on 10 entries, and also when we'll be making some accuracy based on 1,000 entries is entirely different, right? So based on this 1,000 entries, when we'll be making some decision or else the accuracy, then it might be a fine-tuned one when compared with the less amount of entry. That's how we'll be doing in the case of deep learning. And in the case where we'll be having artificial intelligence, we'll be coming across with all such of process which are there. The first thing will be data preparation. where we will be having the data pre-processing concept, which is there, where the cleansing of data as well as preparation of data will be happening. As in the case where we will be cleansing the data, it is the one in which we will be taking into account what all the data which are there, and based on the data which we'll be taking into account, we'll be there, for example, when we'll be taking a data based on some tumor or whatever disease which is there, so in that so much of parameters which are there. So for our particular project which we'll be taking, we need to have only certain amount of parameters which are there. So we'll be taking that parameters alone for our processing, and we'll be disregarding the other parameters which are there. So that is the data cleansing process which is happening. And after which we'll be having the human insight, that is towards that particular process which is carried out, what might be the human insight, or else what might be the ideas which we'll be suggesting, so based on which we'll be making the generalized data. So after which we'll be making the AI modeling. So in the case where we'll be having the model design as well as tuning, we'll be training the data. So for when we need to do a process in such a way that this might be the thing. For example, when a particular machine or AI need to identify that it is the particular object which is there, or else whether there is any object or not. So for which what we'll be doing, we'll be training that particular data sets with as amount of thing. That is, once in one time we'll be training without any object, and in other time we'll be thinking like that is, we'll be having any object. So for which we'll be maintaining some distance measurement by using some sensors. We can use ultrasonic or whatever distance sensor which is there. So for which it will be checking whether there is any object which is there as a hindrance or not. So based on which it will be sensed, and it will be giving you the alert like, so that's how we'll be training the data. So after making certain training, it will be moving to, and here too we'll be checking with what all the interoperability which is there. That is, for example, when it will be it need to get supported with all the things. That is, for example, when we'll be designing some web page, in such a case what we'll be doing, we need to think like it need to work with whatever systems which we'll be using, either with your PC or else with your laptop, or else it need to be responsive with your particular mobile device also. So in such a way we need to decide. That might be the example which we can give for the interoperability. In addition to, we'll be having the next step like simulation as well as test. So in that we'll be integrating all the complex systems which are there, and we'll be making the simulation part here, and we'll be the verification as well as validation is happening here. That is, whether whatever data which we'll be using, that might be correct or not, whether that is in the proper format or not. So in all such, for example, when we'll be typing in a particular web page for your uh, age, for example, if you need to use that particular, or else to apply, they'll be specifying certain age limit. So when you will be entering an age within that particular specified thing, then it will be that is, it is allowing you to pursue in this, or else it will be hindering there itself, and it will be giving some alert message. Or else for typing the phone number, the 10 digits need to be there. That is the normal thing which we need to do. So for which they'll be giving such constraint over there. If it is failing to meet such thing, then it will be providing some alert. That is how the verification as well as validation is happening. After which we need to go with the deployment process. So in the case where we'll be having the deployment process, we'll be checking with the embedded devices. So for making a process to be done, it is not enough for a particular process alone to be carrying out all the process. So for which we'll be integrating a particular thing with some other process or embedded some other systems too. So in such a way, the embedding will be happening there. So that embedded devices may also need to be cooperating with the system which we have built, and it need to give the correct output as how. And also we'll be checking with the enterprise systems, then the edge as well as cloud, desktop, in all such ways whether it is working or not. That deployment or as well as the testing, they'll be checking with the systems. As how I told in the web page, need to be responsive with all the three things. So whether that is adapting or not, they'll be checking with it, and they need to proceed over there. Yes. Another thing which is there is perspective of a common man. So normally when we'll be developing some bot or else any robot which is there, then in such cases it will be acting like a human. So the failure that is whatever the computer which we'll be making it to perform the job, it will be thinking like the human, and as how the human is performing the task, the same way they'll be interacting, as well as they'll be thinking of the things, and they'll be predicting like a human. Um, but the issues which are there, in addition to, even though we'll be having as much of benefits, we'll be having that much of issues too when we'll be concerning with this AI. So for which the bias, causation, then common sense, black box testing, then the static conceptual thinking as well as brain activities, all such things are the issues when we'll be handling with this AI, because it can't, it is not having any common sense, and it is not think that is, even though it is thinking like a human, it is not having the common sense, so that it can't act in that way. And also it is not having the brain as like human, and that all the things which we need to come across with when we'll be, or the issues which we'll be facing when we'll be using this AI. And in the case where we'll be in company too, we'll be using such kind of RPA tools as like bots, which will be integrating the AI concept, and it will be moving ahead. So for which there are two types of data which are there. There is structured data as well as unstructured data are there. So in the case where we'll be having RPA, it will be using the structured data, so that it will be taking into account what all the sequence it need to follow, and based on that we'll be including the activities which are there, and we'll be proceeding thereby with. Mm, and in the case where we'll be having the unstructured RPA, it is like, for example, many companies, they'll be owning their approaches in writing the invoices and all, and in such cases they can use such unstructured approaches, and with the help of that too, they can proceed with such tasks which they'll be carrying out. So for a structure, that is, when it need to follow some sequence, we'll be going with the structured data, and if it is not meant, then we can go with this unstructured data which is there. So in addition to, we'll be taking into account the cognitive automation too. So previously, when we'll be dealing with the IPA, intelligent process automation, we have learned this cognitive automation. So the case where we'll be having the cognitive automation, we'll be having two things to be noted. That is, the first thing is we'll be focusing on the automation here. As we'll be focusing on the automation in the workplace or else in the business, we'll be going to this particular thing. So for which the cognitive automation, using the combination of technologies like that is speech recognition we'll be using, so for which we'll be integrating the natural language processing NLP, which is concept which is there. So it will be integrating both the technologies, and with the help of which it will be recognizing this speech. So for which we need to add some extensions. So here we'll be having as much of things which are there in RPA. That is, when we'll be having the UA part, that's how we'll be implementing in the lab. So in the UA part studio, we can go with the Microsoft Azure and all, and with or else we can integrate the Google, with the help of which we can that is add the extensions which are available there as how we added on that day, and with the help of that extensions too, we can use the particular softwares or else the online things which are available. So that's how we'll be making the also in some other case, when we need to analyze something or else when we need to recognize that this is the object or this is the thing which is there, in such manner we need to make a pattern matching concept. So for finding that pattern matching as well as finding the correlation between with for which too we'll be using such analyzing patterns which is available with the help of the Microsoft contents or else with some other tool, and with help of it we can match to it and we can find the patterns which are matching with it. So these are all some of the cognitive automation concept which we'll be using in the RPA. And the next is Agile, Scrum, Kanban, as well as Waterfall, which are there. So in this, it is a software development which will be quite complex, and three things which we'll be using here that may be varying based on the implementation as well as based on the structure itself. It will be a different approach which we'll be using. Uh, that is in the case where we'll be having the cloud-based integrated, that is the hybrid cloud concept. That particular thing we'll be using in the case of the agile concept. So in which we'll be having the incremental as well as iterative development, where in the company we'll be using such concept, and also you might be studying this in software engineering. And the code development approaches for which we'll be using this Scrum process. So for which we'll be having some product. So based on which we'll be having a vision like this is the way we need to prolong with, and this is how we need to develop a particular product or project. So for which we'll need to take into account what are all the backlogs which are there based on such product development which happened before. So for which we'll be having some planning meetings, and that we'll be discussing about how it need to be proceeded with, and these are all the backlogs which are there, for which how we can overcome it. All such things we need to have in your mind and we need to proceed with. So based on which we'll be having the development team, and the development team is working, and based on which they'll be reviewing then and thereby, after which they'll be deploying the product if it is fit, find that the demo which is suiting well as how they have planned. So that's how they'll be making this Scrum process which is there. And the next is Kanban, in the case of which we'll be taking into account as how the normal notepad which we might be using for having the notes, that is what to be done within what deadline, all such things we'll be taking into our account. So for which too we'll be having the backlog of it, which is the fast track about the previous things which we have done based on the project, and for which we'll be taking into account what are all the things which we need to do at what deadline which we need to fix there, and based on which what is the progress which is there, whether we have reviewed it and what is the level of review, all such things we will be taking, and after which we will be testing. Once it is done, we will be acknowledging like it has done, and it will be when it is not completed, or else when there is an issue, we'll be blocking that too. So that is about the Kanban process which is carried out. Next is the waterfall model. As how the waterfall is happening, we'll be having all such things one another the thing. So here we'll be having at first the requirements. So for every projects which we'll be designing or aiming to do, for which first we'll be thinking about the requirements. What are all the requirements which are there? And based on the requirements, how we can do it. Okay, so that is the first and foremost thing which we'll be thinking about a plan. And the second thing is how we'll be designing. What is the way in which, for example, well, before building a house, even we'll be having a structure in our mind, and this need to be, and this need to be. So in such a way, we'll be putting some workout plan, and we'll be coming up with a plan. And based on that plan, we'll be sticking on to that plan, and we'll be proceeding with. And afterwards, after designing, we'll be moving to the development. So in the development process too, they'll be developing the things, and afterwards they'll be testing the products which are there, and making the testing whether it is suitable for the thing. And with all the test cases which are there, they'll be applying to it, and finds that whether it is suitable to deploy it, or else whether it is easy, or else it is compatible with what are all the things which we'll be thinking about, and whether we can make it online or not. So after making it, we'll be deploying it in the other side, and we'll be making the maintenance accordingly. So these are all about the software engineering products in which we'll be sticking on to for making the products. So next comes the DevOps. So it is a um, critical part where all the fields, all the process which is there, that will be converted to a digital transformation. So in which we'll be having that is in dev part of the thing, we'll be having just the coding software which is there. So it will be taking into account all the process which is related to a project, whether it is a application process, or else it might be checking the quality assurance. All such things will be integrated to it, and that's how it will be done accordingly. So most of the product or project managers are well versed in this when they need to apply or else build a product. So for which we'll be having the working environment in such a way, like this is the cycle which they'll be following. So for which at first they need to plan, then they need to code accordingly, and based on which they need to build the product, then they need to test. After testing, they'll be packing, as well as they'll be releasing the product. Afterwards they'll be operating as well as monitoring. In such a way, the cycle will be proceeding until it is getting as a refined one. So this is how the skills may be used. In addition to, we'll be having the flow charts. So in the case, normally we know about flow chart. It is the flow where the product or else the some process need to be. So for which we'll be having as much of simples as we know for making that flow charts. So for which we'll be having some terminators. So starting as well as terminator, we'll be having the same simple. Then for decision making, we'll be having this dialog box which is there. Then we'll be maintaining the process document, multiple documents, data storage, internal storage. Then for tape data, we'll be having this representation database. We'll be having a thing like a tin, and we'll be having the input as well as output by using some parallelogram. Then display manual operation. For merge, we'll be having a inverted triangle position. Then for connection, that is from one to another flowchart, when we need to connect it, we'll be using this connector symbol. So these are all some of the known symbols which we'll be using for developing a flowchart. So it is also easy for us to visually know about what is the workflow which we'll be carrying out in a common thing for a software applications, and also in what to we'll be using this thing, how we'll be that is in sequence, as we know, it will be including some activity, then again the next flow, likewise it will be integrated, or else the sequence will be added one another, one by one another. So in such a way, one by one way, they'll be adding all these sequence or else the activity which need to be carried out, and that's how they'll be making use of it. So for example, they have given here start data input, where we'll be reading the parameters which are there. Then we'll be checking whether we'll be having the input. So for which we'll be having the decision box. After which we'll be making the decision. Based on the decision, in one end we'll be closing the process, in other end we'll be making the transaction process. Another sample which is there is, based on this particular thing, we'll be having an email folder where we'll be having the multiple invoices which are there. Then we'll be making some optical character recognition which is there based on the natural language processing. Then we'll be having the verification process where the manual intervention is there, and based on the database we'll be verifying the thing. This is about the invoice flow chart which is there. So as a whole, we can see, like, when we'll be using some cloud computing concepts there too, we'll be having as much of the cloud computing concepts. And for the making the web technologies possible, we'll be including HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And to carry out the OCR, that is optical character recognition, we'll be scanning as well as we'll be using the recognition with the help of all such optical character recognition, which is available in Microsoft Azure. And also, in addition to that, we'll be using the databases. Mostly common nearby thing which we are using is NoSQL, where we'll be using the MongoDB and all. And for application programming interface too, we'll be using the automation based on RPA. And also, in addition to, we'll be using the artificial intelligence concepts like machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing. All such things are integrated to RPA, and with the help of which we'll be performing better. Okay, this is all about the RPA skills which we'll be using in the case of RPA.